Goodman stepped into the building, and the silence was immediate. The clatter of keyboards and murmur of office chatter ceased, replaced by a sharp stillness as the employees turned their attention toward him. A ragged figure, standing in the midst of their polished world. Their eyes followed him, unsure of what to make of this unexpected intrusion. It wasn't long before the silence was broken. Laughter, cruel and mocking, echoed off the walls. "Who's this?" one worker whispered, eyes scanning the stranger's torn clothes. Another lazy man trying to beg for a handout. The laughter grew louder, louder still. There was no kindness in their eyes, no recognition of a fellow human. Just disdain. They viewed him as an inconvenience, a symbol of something they felt superior to. From the back of the room, Madame Margaret, the manager, appeared. She surveyed the scene, and her lips twisted in an expression of barely concealed contempt. Her eyes traveled from the ragged man to the employees, her gaze cold and dismissive. "Look at you," she scoffed, her voice sharp. "At your age, you should be ashamed of yourself. Are you here to waste my time? Begging? You should be doing that somewhere else, not here. You've already wasted enough of my precious time." Without hesitation, she turned to John, the gateman, her words cutting through the air. "John, get this man out of here. He's nothing but a nuisance. I won't tolerate it." John, a man in his 50s, stood quietly in the corner, his brow furrowed. His eyes flicked from the beggar to Madame Margaret. There was something in Goodman's posture, something in the way he stood, that stirred John's heart. He knew there was more to this situation than met the eye. But he remained silent, for now. He did not move. Then, without waiting for another order, John stepped forward, his voice steady and calm. "Madame Margaret, I'll handle this." The workers watched, their laughter dying away as John moved toward Goodman. He placed a hand gently on his shoulder, guiding him away from the mocking eyes of the office. The workers, still standing in disbelief, could do nothing but watch as John led the ragged figure toward the back of the building. Away from the jeers, John's demeanor softened. He didn't see a beggar. He saw a man, broken and in need of kindness. He saw the hunger in Goodman's eyes, not for food, but for respect, for human connection. What none of them knew is that the man they had just despised, the man they had just insulted and dehumanized, is their boss. Goodman is the wealthiest man in Lagos. But how did he turn into a beggar? How did he become a subject of shame and mockery despite all his money and fame? Let us go back to the very beginning, where it all started. This is the story of Goodman, a man who had everything the world could offer: money, power, influence, but was emotionally bankrupt. For Goodman, wealth was a curse. People didn't see him, they saw his bank account. They didn't love him, they loved his money. He had given his heart away many times, only to have it broken by people who cared only for what they could take from him. Relationships were transactions. Friendship was an illusion. Goodman was a successful oil and gas mogul, with a string of businesses and properties stretching across the land. He was a king in his domain, yet he found himself alone in his grand mansion, surrounded by luxury but starved for something real, a genuine human connection. At the age of 45, Goodman had experienced enough heartbreaks to fill a lifetime. Every woman who came into his life seemed to be only interested in one thing: his wealth. And every employee who worked for him only cared about the paycheck at the end of the month. No one saw him. No one truly respected him. They respected the money. They respected the power. But Goodman had had enough. One day, while sitting in his opulent office, deep in thought, he came up with a plan that would test the very fabric of human nature. He decided to disappear. To become someone else. For one whole month, he would disguise himself as a beggar and see if his employees would still show him the respect he deserved, not for his wealth, but for the person he truly was. And so, the stage was set. Deep within the towering walls of his luxury office, with the wealth of the world spread out before him, Goodman sat in silence. His empire was vast, his influence unchallenged, but his heart felt empty, like a well that had been drained of all its water. The smiles around him, the lavish gifts, the endless compliments, none of it was real. It was all fake. People saw him as a golden goose, not a man. They wanted what he had, but none of them cared for who he truly was. Each day, the loneliness grew stronger, gnawing at him like a hungry beast. He'd had enough. His entire life had been a series of disappointments, a carousel of false friendships and empty love. His wealth, his power, those things hadn't protected him from the pain of betrayal. The thought of spending the rest of his life surrounded by people who only loved him for his riches haunted him. He needed to know, needed to see with his own eyes, if anyone, just one person, would care about him, not for his money, but for his heart. As the sun dipped behind the city skyline, casting long shadows across the room, Goodman's mind began to work. A plan. A test. 1 month. For a whole month, he would disguise himself, hide behind the mask of poverty and beggary. He would strip away the trappings of wealth and see how his workers treated him when they could no longer see the man of riches, only a man in need. This would be his final attempt to uncover the truth. He picked up the phone, his fingers steady but his heart racing. He called his managers, told them he was going on a vacation for a month. He left instructions for his company's affairs, ensuring the business would continue without him. As he hung up the phone, Goodman felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. The stage was set. For the first time in years, he felt hope. Hope that this test might finally reveal the loyalty he had been longing for. The day Goodman chose to begin his test was like any other in Lagos, hot, bustling, and filled with noise. But today, it was not the familiar hum of business that filled his ears. No, today, the world he was about to enter would be a world where he was no longer Goodman the billionaire. He was now a different man, a stranger in his own kingdom. His transformation was complete. He stood before his mirror, staring at the reflection of someone unrecognizable. His once neat hair was now a tangled mess, and his face, once sharp and clean, was now covered with a bushy beard, matted and unkempt. His clothes, once crisp and expensive, were now torn, dirty rags that clung to his body. His hands, once well kept, were rough and calloused from days spent on the streets. With each passing moment, he felt himself sinking deeper into his new persona. A beggar. A man with nothing. He walked out of his house and made his way through the crowded streets, blending in with the forgotten, the overlooked, the unseen. The world he knew, the world of power and wealth, was now behind him. His first stop was his own company. When Goodman walked into the building, he could feel the eyes of his employees upon him. At first, they stared, unsure of what to make of this ragged figure standing in their midst. Then came the laughter, mocking, cruel laughter that echoed through the hallways. The workers, comfortable in their positions, looked at him with disdain. One whispered to another, "Look at this one, probably another lazy man begging for a handout." From the corner of the room, Madame Margaret, the manager, appeared. Her gaze narrowed as she took in the sight of the ragged beggar standing there. She was the first to speak, her voice dripping with disdain. "At your age, you should be ashamed of yourself. Are you here to waste my time? You should be begging elsewhere, not here. You've wasted enough of my time already." Without a second thought, she turned to John, the gateman, and ordered, "Get this man out of here. He's nothing but a nuisance. Throw him out." John, a humble man in his 50s, stood in the background, watching silently. His gaze flickered from the beggar to Madame Margaret. But when he saw the ragged figure, something in his heart stirred. He knew something was not right, but he didn't speak. Instead, he took a step forward. "Madame Margaret, I will handle this," John said quietly, his voice calm but firm. The workers, still laughing, watched as Goodman was about to be thrown out, but John stepped in, offering a kindness that no one else could see. He led Goodman away from the crowd, far from the mocking eyes of the employees. John didn't see a beggar. He saw a man in need, a man who had no one. He offered Goodman food, a plate of rice and stew, something simple yet filled with care. Then, he took out $500 from his pocket and handed it to Goodman, telling him it was for transport. He even offered him a change of clothes, clean, simple clothes, worn by John himself, but better than the rags Goodman wore. Goodman, overwhelmed by the kindness, looked up at John, his heart pounding with gratitude. He had not expected this. No one had shown him this kind of kindness in years. No one had treated him as a human being, not a working bank account, not a man with power. But here, in the eyes of John, he saw a reflection of what humanity truly meant. The next morning, Goodman, still cloaked in his disguise, stood at the gates of his own company once more. His clothes, dirty and tattered from the day before, clung to his body, and his beard had grown even more unkempt. His heart beat with a strange anticipation, knowing what awaited him on the other side of those gates. He walked into the compound, his footsteps slow but deliberate, each one echoing with the weight of his mission. The workers, as if sensing his return, watched him with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. There was something different about his presence this time, something that felt heavier in the air. But before anyone could speak, Madame Margaret stormed out of the building, her eyes blazing with fury. She had seen enough. "What is this madness?" she snapped, her voice sharp and filled with disdain. "You think you can just come back here after everything that's happened?" Without warning, she grabbed a bucket of water nearby and hurled it over Goodman's head, drenching him completely. The water, cold and stinging, ran down Goodman's face, but he did not flinch. He had expected no less. In her eyes, he was nothing but a beggar, a nuisance, a person unworthy of respect. He could see it clearly now. His test had been unfolding before him, and the lesson was becoming painfully evident. "Leave. And never come back," Madame Margaret shouted, her voice rising with anger. "You're a disgrace. I'll have you arrested if you show your face here again." But just as the words were about to leave her mouth, a voice, quiet yet firm, spoke from behind. "Madam, let me handle this," John, the gateman, said calmly. The words were like a gentle breeze cutting through the storm. John's presence seemed to have an unspoken authority, and for a moment, even Madame Margaret paused. Without a second thought, John stepped forward, his hand reaching out to steady Goodman. Despite Madame Margaret's orders to throw him out, John remained resolute. He knew what was right, and he would not let the cruelty of the others stop him. Once again, he led Goodman away from the hostile eyes of the employees and into a quiet corner of the compound. This time, John was more insistent. He gave Goodman another plate of food, warm and comforting, a simple meal that spoke more of love than any gold or silver. He gave Goodman another $500 note for transport, though this time, his kindness felt like more than just charity. It was the act of a man who saw beyond appearances, beyond wealth. John even took out his own clean clothes and handed them to Goodman, offering him dignity, something the others had long since forgotten. He didn't see a beggar, he didn't see someone beneath him. He saw a man, a fellow human being, and that was all that mattered. Meanwhile, the other workers, including Madame Margaret, watched from afar, indifferent, unaware of the compassion unfolding in the shadows. Goodman's heart swelled with gratitude. The world he had once trusted had shown him nothing but disdain, but here, in the hands of a humble gateman, he found the kindness he had sought for so long. It was in these quiet moments, these small acts of selflessness, that the true test of loyalty was revealed. Do you think John's actions were extraordinary? What would you have done in his place? The sun had barely risen on the third day when Goodman, still cloaked in the tattered rags of his disguise, made his way back to his company. The dust of the road clung to his clothes, and his heart pounded with anticipation. This time, it felt different. He was no longer just a beggar wandering the streets, he was a man on a mission, his final test of loyalty, and he knew today would be the day when the truth would finally come to light. As he entered the company's gates, the workers caught sight of him again. Their laughter echoed, louder than before. They whispered behind their hands, pointing, mocking, and sneering. Madam Margaret, as cold as ever, stepped forward from the office, her eyes narrowing as she saw the ragged figure approaching once more. "You again," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You dare to show your face here after everything? You've wasted enough of my time. Get out of here, now." But this time, there was something more to her words. She looked to one of the employees, who quickly reached for the phone and dialed the number of the police. The decision had been made, Goodman would not be allowed to walk away this time. Within minutes, the officers arrived, their presence imposing. They were ready to take him away, to lock him up for trespassing, for daring to return to a place where he was no longer welcome. Goodman's heart clenched, but he stood firm. He knew this moment had to come. It was all part of the test. As the officers approached, something unexpected happened. John, the gateman, who had been watching silently from the background, stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "Stop," John said, his tone commanding yet calm. The officers froze, their hands lingering near their belts as they turned to face him. "I'll take him," John continued. "Let me handle this." The police hesitated for a moment, exchanging glances, before nodding and stepping aside. John had spoken with such authority that they felt no need to challenge him. But as John led Goodman away from the watching eyes of the employees, Goodman knew that this was the moment of truth, the moment when his test would come to its climax. In the quiet of the back courtyard, John stopped, his eyes softening as he looked at the figure before him. And then, with a deep breath, Goodman began to remove the worn cap that had shielded his identity. He pulled it off slowly, deliberately, and then tugged at the tattered shirt that clung to his body. As the last piece of his disguise came off, the truth was revealed. Standing before them was not the beggar they had laughed at, but their billionaire boss, Goodman. His well-known face, now free of its disguise, was a stark contrast to the man they had so carelessly rejected. The employees who had watched from the windows of the office now gathered at the courtyard's entrance, their jaws dropping in disbelief. Madam Margaret, unable to comprehend what she was seeing, stepped forward in shock, her eyes wide. "No. It can't be," she stammered, but Goodman's cold gaze silenced her. He looked at his employees, including Madam Margaret, and spoke with a clarity that shook the air. "I've been watching all of you. I've been testing you to see who would treat me as a person, not as a paycheck. You, Madam Margaret, have treated me with nothing but contempt. You thought I was beneath you, didn't you?" Goodman's voice was steady but filled with the weight of truth. "I wanted to know if anyone here had the heart to see me for who I truly am, not for the wealth I've built." The silence that followed was thick with shame. Madam Margaret stood there, unable to find the words to defend herself. The workers, too, were quiet, their faces filled with a mixture of guilt and astonishment. But Goodman wasn't finished. The moment had come for the final revelation. "I've made my decision," he continued, his voice firm. "Madam Margaret, you are no longer the general manager of Goodman Holdings. I'm replacing you." The words hit like a thunderclap, and Madam Margaret's face turned pale. She opened her mouth to protest, but no sound came. Instead, Goodman turned to John, who had been standing quietly, watching the entire scene unfold. "John," Goodman said, his voice filled with respect, "you are the new general manager." The room fell silent. The workers, stunned, looked at one another. John, the humble, kind-hearted gateman, was now their leader. Goodman's eyes softened as he looked at John, the man who had shown him what true loyalty meant. Your actions speak louder than anything money can buy, John. You have proven to me that kindness, loyalty, and a good heart are the true treasures in this world. And just like that, the world of Goodman Holdings was turned upside down. Goodman's faith in humanity had been restored, not by the wealth he had accumulated, but by the kindness of one man, the man who had seen beyond the rags and the dirt, who had treated him with dignity when no one else would. What do you think of Goodman's decision to make John the new GM? Would you have done the same? Share your thoughts below. And so, the story of Goodman's test spread far and wide, like the winds that carry whispers through the villages, reaching even the farthest corners of the land. News of what happened at Goodman Holdings soon became the talk of Lagos, and before long, it went viral. People marveled at the wisdom of Goodman's plan. They spoke of it in hushed tones, for it was not just a story about a billionaire who tested his employees, but a story about loyalty, kindness, and the true value of a person. The tale resonated deeply with those who heard it. It served as a reminder that respect and loyalty are not things that can be bought with money. No, these are things that come from the heart, from the core of a person's being. Goodman's wealth had attracted many, but it was the heart of John, the humble gatesman, that proved to be the true treasure. Through this test, Goodman learned that the people who truly matter are not those who praise you for what you have, but those who stand by you when you have nothing. The story changed Goodman's life. It changed the lives of those around him. And in the end, it reminded all of us that the right people, those who see us for who we truly are, can make all the difference in the world. If you learned something valuable from this story, don't forget to like, share, and comment your thoughts. And for more life lessons like this, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to be the first to watch our next inspiring videos.